What's up, good people? Listen, I'm your host, Quantel Lindsey. This is the Quantel Lindsey Podcast, and I have a friend, a brother, a special guest. We have been going back and forth trying to make this happen. I have Dr., Senator, Professor, Conservative, Dr. James Adam Lowe. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you, brother.
Man, likewise, King. Listen, you got some fans and supporters. When we put the promo up, people said, he's the man. I got inboxes. I'm excited for this. I said, okay, this is going to be a fun one. So I want to jump right in. Who is Dr. J. Adam Lowe? And could you explain the J?
The J. Well, it's my biblical name. It's Joshua.
Okay. Yahshua.
But people might say Adam's my biblical name, but truthfully, my mother named me after a character on Bonanza. So that it doesn't really work out that way. So yeah, I say Joshua is the biblical part. And so I was named after Joshua. And my father had chosen the name Joshua because he was a young leader in Scripture. Wow. So in some ways, it was a little bit of providence on behalf of my father in naming me and knowing that maybe one day down the road that I would move into a position of leadership at a young age. And of course, that actually came true. So maybe he knew something. Maybe the Lord was speaking to him.
Wow, prophecy fulfilled. So Dr. Joshua Adam Lowe, who is Senator the man? We know you as a senator. I know you as someone that does not mind verbally sparring with anyone who slide up in your comments. And say so. I may or may not get lost in reading your comments. You got some good comebacks, by the way, and you do not. What the young kids say, you don't duck the smoke.
No. They got my kids have all kinds of lingo they attribute to me nowadays. But I guess it's a good way of putting it. Somebody has to do it. There are a couple of things, a couple of like little colloquial phrases I disagree with. One of them is don't do business with friends. Only do business with friends, right? Just bring them, right? If you're trying to cut a deal, that's why people say that. But yeah, do business with friends and pay more to do business with friends, right? Okay. The second one is never talk about politics or religion. Those are the only two things worth discussing, right? One determines quality of life here on earth. The other determines, what happens in eternity. And so I've just never dodged those issues. Social media has become this platform where it can be very, very toxic. And truthfully, a lot of people get butthurt on that platform, even when I come back at them. I always kind of post with a grin. I'm going to challenge ideas. I'm going to challenge people. And if people start acting a fool and get real personal, sometimes people have to learn if you throw a punch, you're going to get punched back. I'm a little old school that way. Too often times people in positions like mine just say nothing and they leave that void. And if you leave a vacuum, somebody's going to fill it. Nobody's going to fill a vacuum for me. I'll be glad to fill it myself.
Definitely. As I read, you stand on that, and I see that. Man, one thing. Did you always wanted to go to politics? I read your bio. Let's talk about that first book. Let's talk about that book you wrote, and where can people get that book?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can search for my name, J. Adam Lowe. But the name of the book is Naked True. How to Uncover Truth in a #Fake World. It's a short book, easy read. It's a book of stories. And I wrote that book because I think the challenge with an emerging youth, there's a lot of great books out right now that I would encourage people to read related to what we would consider Gen Z, right? Okay. What Gen Z and the following Gen Alpha generations are contending with, what they're dealing with in society. But I didn't find a book that did what I wanted Naked True to do, which was being just so blatantly transparent with the fact that truth matters.
Wow, yes.
And it exists, and we should seek it. So that book really doesn't kind of define for you what a truth would be, although I have a lot of opinions about that. But it really is just this encouragement and then just kind of a schedule of stories that outlines where people may have dodged truth until they finally embraced reality and in embracing reality, found just a lot of constructive existence. We talk about Milli Vanilli, for those who are from my era. We talk about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We talk about Stan Lee, who is the father of Marvel Comics. There's a lot of great stories in that book. So you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble's, any place you find major.
Man, that's amazing. And you have something else coming out. You're working on something, another book as well?
Yeah, it got delayed because I got elected to the Tennessee Senate. So it's been stalled. Writing's hard.
Come on.
And it's not, the first 90% is easy. The last 10%, putting a bow on that thing's hard. But for about 3 years, Naked Truth's been out since 21. And for 3 years, I've been working on the second book, which is a book called Plastic Wars. And it's a kind of a blend of my personal memoir. Growing up as, a low income kid, you and I've had this conversation, Quantel, I was the only white family on the street.
Wow. Yeah.
Of a lot of what people experience. And, growing up in that era, and talking about how, people put on us conflicts that maybe don't really resonate with us. I tell a story about going to a community center. I was 9 years old, and my best friend was a guy named Chuma. He was my neighbor. And of course he was black, I was white. And I remember this lady telling me that we didn't like each other.
Wow.
That we weren't supposed to, I remember how odd that was to us, like us looking at each other like, we didn't realize we were supposed to hate each other until you told us we were supposed to hate each other. But Plastic Wars is that tenor. That's just one example. But we do that as a society. A lot of times we borrow these conflicts that really have no end result, no substance. They eat us alive, both emotionally, financially, relationally in the world, and we get nothing out of it. So it's kind of it hits that on a lot of notes. It talks about journalism and media. It talks about politics, faith, religion. So I'm excited to finish that book. And I hope once we get it finished that the publisher will choose to publish it. They like that thus far.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that. Listen, you growing up, you say you were the only white kid on the block. Like, that's a twist. And I knew that, but for the viewers, a lot of people don't know that. I see you have a cool hat on from the greatest state in the union.
Yeah, I'm ready today.
Born and raised Tennessee or transplant? Well,
I'm a transplant. I'm from North Carolina.
Okay.
I moved to Tennessee in the 90s for college. I love Tennessee. North Carolina's got a lot of problems. Tennessee doesn't have as many problems.
Yeah.
So there was a lot I liked about Tennessee. But the big reason I stayed in Tennessee, to be honest with you, my wife's from South Georgia. It was a good middle ground to start, but just the culture of community in Southeast Tennessee, we loved. And I was a young entrepreneur. I was really aspirational to be in business, start in business. And Tennessee was just a better business environment. It's a better place to be.
To do business. My favorite state. Talk to me, Senator. You wake up one day and say, I'm gonna fulfill somewhat of my dad's prophecy. I am going into politics. I done did business. You're a professor. You got a doctorate. You're well educated. And you say, why politics? Why run for the Senate in the state of Tennessee?
I started out in local government. So I was on the commission in Southeast Tennessee for a number of years. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. I mean, local government has more influence over our lives as our family. I mean, it's going to control education, law enforcement, fire service, roads, all that's done at the local level. And so I recommend to anyone who might have aspirations of government service, politics is the medium whereby we become servants in government, right? You have to go through the realm of politics. But if you're looking at government service, I recommend the local level because you learn so much. And so I started there. I took a break to finish my doctorate and to just kind of figure out how to be a better dad and a better husband for about 8 years. Had not anticipated getting back into the political realm. And, God orchestrates things to where when a door opens, if the Lord opens a door, walk through it. I'll be my advice to anybody listening to your podcast. Opens the door, walk through it, look around, see what's there. And we did that with the Senate role. Kids were a little older. A good senator was retiring. I didn't want to lose the momentum that he had developed for our area of the state. And in doing that, I felt compelled that I could continue his legacy. And that's how we jumped back into the realm of politics. And a lot of it's issues based in the state of Tennessee. You noted when we kind of got on the program, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative. Part of what drives me to be Republican and conservative are some of the realities I think we face, which is making sure government doesn't intrude too much into our lives. Yeah. I believe that the nuclear family is the most basic form of a healthy society.
Come on.
Parents and their children, investing in their children, teaching their children personal responsibility, being outside of that bubble. We move to neighborliness. There's no greater form of social justice than benevolence. It's being good to your neighbor, right? That's the purest form of social justice. That's where we start. Care, compassion for our neighbors. And then we can get into the things government has to control on the macro level, like building roads and funding schools. And we get there. But I believe in those very small government conservative things. I challenge the notion that, this is troublesome, but it's coming around. I've argued conservatives are champions for diversity. We say you don't have to be like me, act like me, have what I have, think like I think. And we've lost that in some spaces, both within the big tent of conservatism and from the perspective on the outside. So, I'm kind of cycling those core principles of what it means to be a conservative back up. And I'm blessed to have the outlet in the Senate to be a voice for those things, right? To be a voice for stronger communities, stronger families. I operate every day with the notion that if you are a responsible parent, I want you to have as much influence and control over your child and their well-being as you can have. And I want the government to have as little influence in that. Again, keyword, responsible parent. We know this.
Responsible. Wow. We are listen, you're tuned into the Quantel Lindsey Podcast. I got Senator Lowe here. This episode is brought to you by Blueprint for Life. There is no blueprint for life, but together we can create one. Senator, you represent 250,000 people, if I'm correct?
Close. Right. 210,000.
Man, 210. Man, wow. That's amazing, but that's a daunting task. And I love what you said, though. I try to, on this podcast, I try to bring people on and educate not only myself, but the listeners and the viewers. I believe we should, as a community, we should be hyper local. And our government hyper local and voting on a local level, local, state, and national. But I really believe that I say what Senator Lowe, the bill he passes, and this is just my belief, you could educate me and feel free. The bill you pass will make it to my door before the one they pass in Washington. I just live by that. And I always say I'll feel that one first, even though they all matter. So I encourage people to be hyper local, because one thing I know, the clips, the show is national, the reality show, the drama, the back and forth. But I believe our local representatives play a pivotal role, a very important role in our quality of life here, as far as the road, law enforcement, chief of police, the mayor, et cetera, et cetera. So you've been in the Senate for how long?
Finishing up 2 years. We finished our first session.
Now, for those who don't know, how long is a senator's term in Tennessee?
4 years. So I'll have to run again in 2 more years.
So you have to run again in 2 more years. What has been the highlight of being in the Senate?
Wow. We've passed some good legislation. I mean, there's some red meat stuff for people on my side of the aisle, the conservatives. We did some of the largest tax increases the state has seen, because Tennessee is very economically prosperous right now. Yeah. So a lot of the good things you do in government is to make sure you don't screw it up, right? Like you get in the way of it. Don't have so much ego that you think you got to put your fingerprints on everything. Sometimes there's a good thing happening, and the best thing you can do is just encourage it along. And the business community in Tennessee is strong. It doesn't need a lot of our opinions right now. It needs to let people who aspire to be both effective, productive, and profitable, to allow them to do what they do. And so we've done that in Tennessee. But I had a couple of key pieces of legislation that were real important to me. A lot of them have to do with substance abuse and drunk driving. And we passed the most aggressive bill related to tackling the epidemic of fentanyl that we see in our state. I carried that bill, worked with the DAs, the sheriffs, victims' rights advocates, because we've got to get a wrangle on that. And that is,
I agree.
we got to target the traffickers. We got to get them right, and there have to be consequences when you just peddle poison to our families and our loved ones. And addiction's a real thing. People struggle with it. There are consequences to addiction, and there have to be consequences to feeding addiction too. And so Tennessee's doing that with the fentanyl bill we passed. Ledford's Law and Dillard's Law, tackling some issues with drunk driving in our state that were important. Some of that is making sure that people who are offenders, when they come out and get the treatment they need to stay sober, because if we can keep them out of their addictive patterns, they don't reoffend. They don't drunk drive again. They don't kill someone else again. And so that's some good bills around that. But, we've done a lot for public education. The past 6 years, Tennessee has made more investment in public ed than the entire history of anyone else's tenures. You can't find another window of time in Tennessee history where we've done more. $1.8 billion additional public ed. And Quantel, you and I both know that education is the launching pad to a successful life, right? And to install within someone not only the ability to learn, but the desire to learn is what will empower them to be productive, caring, and responsible citizens. So we've made those investments in education, $1.8 billion. And of course, come by how economically prosperous we've been in the state.
Wow. That's amazing. And I support those bills. Those are strong bills. And I'm so glad you brought those bills on, because people need to know the bills you're bringing to the floor that not only protects Tennesseans, hold Tennesseans accountable. And I love what you said, to break the pattern, just to break the pattern. So the Leffert Law, Dillard's Law, and all those bills, and investing in education, those are things of quality of life. It does start with education, and just good education. Let's be clear. I always live by saying, I tell my wife, Senator, I'd rather have no information than bad information sometimes. Because bad information is hard to see, to get away from. I can always, if I have no information, I can find the right information. But if I have bad information, I can live a long life in the wrong direction. But let me stop you. You're here for the interview. Listen, you said education. I got to ask you, what is your views on school choice in the state of Tennessee?
Well, I've been an advocate. I ran as a school choice candidate. Again, I'm a product of public education. My kids are in public education. My wife works in public education. I want to care for public education, make robust investment. And public education is a part of school choice. We forget, right? We forget that school choice begins with a healthy, effective public offering, a safe public offering. We made the most historic investment in the nation in school safety this past session too. Why? Because we want our kids to be safe. Most of our kids are going to go to public education, but it's unrealistic to expect public educators to be everything to everybody.
True.
They can't. So what school choice says philosophically is, we want parents to be able to navigate their child's educational journey, even when it's exceptional. And that exceptional may be that this child's particularly bright. It may be that they have special needs. It may be that emotionally and socially they need a better environment to flourish in. It may not even be related to academics, right? And there's no better judge of that than the parents. So for some kids, private school is going to be the best school. For some kids, charter school is going to be the best outlet. For some kids, homeschool is going to be the best outlet. What we don't have is always an alignment of that being the best outlet for a child and the ability of the family to pursue that outlet. I grew up in a low income community. My parents weren't college educated. My dad never finished high school. They valued education. They pushed education, and I pursued it. They instilled that in me. I worked hard to get to where I did, to get to be Dr. Lowe, right? While I watched my peers fade away from addiction and other things, right? People I loved and grew up with. So I believe in the value of education. And I also see where my life was limited because I was from a low income background. The opportunities I didn't get to pursue, the opportunities that friends of mine who did drift into addiction and drift out of education would have succeeded had they had those opportunities. School choice says, how do we present those opportunities? How do we take wealth out of the equation of whether or not you have access to those?
Wow.
And so that we're having those conversations in Tennessee right now. How do we eliminate wealth as a qualifier to whether or not you can optimize your child's educational journey? And so school choice initiatives seek to allow students to use that public funding, their parents to by default move in those educational paths that may not be in public ed. And if we're going to make an investment in a kid's educational future, and in Tennessee, it's around $7,000 a year. If we're going to make that investment, the most responsible investment we can make is the one that produces the most productive adult outside of education, right? So it's also, for us as taxpayers, we really shouldn't care which educational journey as long as it's the best. Right? We shouldn't care public, private, or whatnot. And so we've been having those arguments at the state level. So aside from all of the little, people like to throw gasoline on the fire, use power words to display people. That's the core of what we're trying to do.
So everything you just said was beautiful. I think they need to let you just clip this and run this as the campaign for school choice, because what Tennessean would not agree with that? So I'll ask you that, Senator. Why do we have those in the legislature, in the Senate, and on the other side of the aisle? I'm just be frank. Why do they oppose school choice and school vouchers, and they're giving taxpayers money is going to rich elite kids and segregating kids? Like, because I heard everything you just said, and I'm like, man, that sounds beautiful. That sounds like a great opportunity. And I love some kids thrive in a private setting. Some kids thrive in a charter setting. Some kids say, no, I'm good in my public school. Why would anyone oppose that if the data proves a good education leads to a better quality life in the state of Tennessee?
Well, there's a couple of reasons they would oppose it. Well, oftentimes it's fear. That fear can be both rational and irrational.
Okay.
It's an irrational fear to say that instituting a healthy voucher program in Tennessee will bankrupt public education. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence that 1.5% of students coming out of public ed and choosing another path is going to bankrupt our public schools. There's no evidence that Tennessee, as a legislature, our governor, our Department of Education, has done anything but increase investment in public education. Wow. So all that's irrational fear, but people stoke it up a lot of times.
It is.
Yeah. Some of it back to core philosophy. Again, when I made the case for school choice, I said something important to you, that I believe the parents are the best deciders of which educational path is right for their child.
You did.
There are some people who don't believe that. They don't believe parents are capable. It's the cynicism of experts. If I'm the expert in education, I may be an educator, and therefore I know better what's for your child. Well, you may know better about the academics and the academic journeys and those nuggets and pieces, but you don't live with my child. True. You don't know my child's emotional needs maybe as good as I see them. You haven't seen them flourish in environments socially outside of education where I find that they're optimal. They haven't laid with you and prayed to God for their dreams and their hopes like they have with me, right?
Wow. Strong point.
You have to kind of figure out, and I would say to any parent out there, though I, as a legislator, want to protect your right to pursue that, do it in consult with people who do know those educational pieces, right? Yes. It's really the beauty of education's the public-private partnership. It's parents and teachers working together. It's why in Southeast Tennessee, our public schools are so loved. It's because our public educators have great relationships with families and they communicate back and forth. Yes. So I think that comes back to it. A lot of times it's the disagreement on who is most qualified to decide an educational path for a student. And far more consistently on the left, do we see people make the case that parents are not qualified.
Okay, that's good. And that's going to lead me to my next one, Senator. For one, I love what you said. parents, responsible parents. So if you're going to chop this up, don't miss that part. Responsible parents that know their child. That sounds like when it comes to school choice, you're advocating for smaller government. Make the choice on your own. Sit down and see if your kid fits in a charter, a public or private or homeschool, smaller government. So but then you're saying, other people saying, no, let me zone out, pick the where you live, determine which school your kid comes from. One could argue that no, I'm American, I can sit down and I can make the right and decision as a family what best fits little Timmy in this house. So with that being said, you're a senator, and I'm gonna ask you a question from the viewer standpoint. Pro-life, pro-choice, where is Dr. Adam Lowe in this debate?
Oh, well, I'm vehemently pro-life because I was the fetus. I mean, I was born to a teenage mother. I was born in an environment where there was a moment where my teenage mother was being compelled not to keep me. And so I have very strong opinions about whether that was her decision to make or not. Now, there are people who disagree with me. They believe it was her decision. But as the kid that made it out, I'm very thankful that, and my mother would tell you that she didn't feel it was her decision, that she felt her decision for life was her respecting my existence, not her choice to make. And that you don't find that very common in women until you get to women who have rejected abortion as an alternative to life. And so I'm vehemently pro-life. I have, because of my testimony and story, and because of what, where I come from in my family, I've been able to mingle with other people with similar stories. I've been able to mingle with people who are products of incest and rape, and they are people. It's hard to look at them and say, from a policy perspective, you're a second-class human. And sometimes we forget that when we so loosely communicate pro-choice arguments, we often reduce people to that. We reduce them to the situations they came from and not the humanity that they possess. So I do believe that was my right to exist. We can argue over when, the age-old debates of when life begins and all of that kind of stuff. But I will say this, in a post-Roe v. Wade culture, where conservatives have messed up, where we have messed up, is by saying, oh, well, 6 weeks or heartbeat or 16 weeks. The line of life is not an arbitrary line for us to draw. It's either there or it's not.
Sir.
That's my belief. That's my analysis. We don't get to draw arbitrary lines at certain amount of weeks on whether it's there or whether it's not. The debate we have to have in society is whether we believe life is present and worth protecting, whether it's innocent and worth protecting, or it's not. And I have some colleagues on the left, dear friends, and we argue and debate and have for 20 years on this issue because they do not believe it is life until it's coherent, until it can feel, they have different thresholds. But conservatives have messed up by saying you can draw that line arbitrarily. I'm a person of faith. I believe God breathes life into us. I believe it's his line to draw, not mine. And it's my job to recognize it.
Amen.
And that's what I'll continue to do as a senator.
Wow. Again, I go back to powerful, brother. I didn't know to give an offering or shout. You started preaching there for a minute, Dr. Lowe.
I just want to be transparent,
Yeah, I love it. Listen, you guys on the Quantel Lindsey Podcast with Senator Dr. Adam Lowe, man of many titles, husband, father. Again, I love what you said. Your mother's felt like that wasn't her choice. And look what you were able to go accomplish. And you're not even nowhere near done yet. You're relatively a young man. Again, it goes back to I'm talking about small government, making the choice what's best for you and your family. So we have some party, conservative, Republican, Senator Lowe say, listen, the family needs to make the best decision for their child. They need to make the choice. And then these other people say, well, my body, my choice. How come they don't have that same view with every other aspect? Like you're making a choice, but your mother says she didn't feel like that was her choice to take your life. So again, it's like I'm looking and I'm tuning into everything, and I'm saying, where do we allow for government? Because I'm gonna go here. We love choice up until the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
We love choice until it's school. So we're picking and choosing, cherry picking of when choice matters, when we want large government and when we want big government. So I love what you said. So, and when I say that, because I say, well, my body, my choice. Okay, what do we say about the brother? Say, my AR, my choice. Like, and I'm being facetious and tongue in cheek, but we can't. So I don't understand why people say no to school choice. And when I say this, we have my team. We have invited people on the show to come on and share their view, just like you. So for those that saying, well, Quantel, you seem like you only bring conservatives or Republicans on. No, we've reached out to the lady that's Gloria John. We've reached out to all of them. Come on here, elaborate your position, because we want to hear from you. I gotta give a shout out to my Republican conservative brothers and sisters. They respond back and they come on and they talk their issues. They talk about it and they elaborated on it. So I want you to know, for the listeners, we send open invitations because we believe you can dialogue without disrespect. So going back to that, so your for school choice, your pro-life, powerful what you said was about your mother. She didn't feel that was her choice. That was amazing. Now I want to ask you, said fentanyl. What is the what do we need to do more? What does the legislator needs to do more? Is fentanyl solely tied into the southern border? So I'm gonna ask you two questions. Elaborate on the border, because you were one of the few that got up and went to the southern border, correct?
Yeah. I went and saw the fentanyl comes through. I met with the mayors of Mexican towns where the cartel's set up.
Wow.
Government officials in there. We just have to be real with it. The fentanyl issue has gotten woven into the immigration debate because it is a matter of our borders. And this is what I'll say to your viewers and listeners: border security and immigration are two different things. They're two different.
Educate us, Dr. Lowe.
Yeah, if you go to the border and you talk to Border Patrol, they are not in the business of immigration. They are not in the business of making immigration-based decisions. That's ICE, right? Like they're in the business of making sure the border is secure enough to prevent threats from entering our nation, but at the same time being controlled enough to allow non-threats to enter into our nation. Because here is the truth of our entry policy at the border. If you come to a gate and you document yourself, we let you in. In some cases, we give you clothes, food, a cell phone. The Catholic Charities will help find you a sponsor to place you in the nation. That there are many times Border Patrol will pick up a family on the south of the border who has come to the wall, and they will transport them to the gate. A former Tennessee senator, national senator, Fred Thompson, once said, we need tall fences and wide gates. That's our goal. So the question becomes then, who are the people who can't go through our gates? Who are the people who can't come in, who don't want to be documented? Those are the people who aren't coming through the gate. Those are the people who are making their way across the holes in our wall, or it's more like a fence. Those are the people who are swimming rivers, and those are the people who are using illegal means to get into our country. There is one other exception I will note, because occasionally someone will bring it up. Coyotes bring in innocent families illegally all the time. And they exploit the fact that those families don't know that they can just come get in line at the gate and come in. And they will bankrupt those. They'll take everything they own, convincing them that America doesn't want them, they can't come through the gate, and they've got to smuggle them in. So that does happen. But until we create and we limit and we control that border to shut down that economy, those coyotes abusing those immigrant families who are trying to come in, until we secure the border, we can't stop that.
Wow, I love you. Border Patrol and immigration, two different things. Coyotes. For the listeners, elaborate on that term. Coyotes are bringing people.
People who are in the business of smuggling people across the border.
Okay. All right. I
To an illegal means.
yeah.
But you about fentanyl, and a lot of times you'll hear from the left, well, the majority of seized fentanyl at the border is by U.S. citizens, and that statistic is true. It's absolutely true. But let
Okay.
me say something really common sense to you. 100% of the fentanyl killing us in Tennessee was not seized at the border. Think about that.
Yeah.
100%. We're not talking about what's getting seized at ports of entry. Yes, trying to traffic fentanyl across ports of entry is where U.S. citizens engaged in illegal activity choose to operate. But
Mm.
the cartels operate through the holes in the wall. I had mayors of little towns, border towns in Mexico say, if you'll close that hole in the fence, the cartel will leave my town. They'll stop killing my police chiefs. They'll stop recruiting my youth. Think about that for
Wow.
a moment. If you, that's the
Wow.
only reason they're set up there is because of the entry point we've created in the United States with our border patrol and border security. So those tend to be the ports of entry that they choose to traffic that garbage in. Pharmaceutical grade fentanyl is not what we're seizing on the streets. It's not what
Okay.
our family members and loved ones are ODing on. It's not what's feeding addiction in Tennessee. It is Chinese manufactured fentanyl from China, brought to Mexico, packaged in Mexico, and trafficked into the United States through the porous border and up our corridors and interstates.
Mm.
That's what we see. So in
Wow.
Tennessee, we've done all we really can do. We have to target the traffickers. We have to penalize bringing it through Tennessee. For a drug trafficker, it's got to be expensive and dangerous to do business in our state. And we're making it expensive and dangerous for those people. But we have to have a real conversation at the federal level on what it means to secure our borders. And we need one on immigration too, but those do not have to be interwoven. They don't have to be together.
Love that. So you're and you correct me if I'm wrong. So you're saying we need to tighten up, fix the border, and have a better immigration progress a process for those who want to migrate legally and get on the pathway to citizenship in this country.
Yeah, yeah. What we want are the right people immigrating to the United States.
Yeah.
And for a long time, we had preferential immigration in the United States. We became the greatest country in the world by taking the brightest minds in Austria in World War II and giving them expedited citizenship into the United States.
Wow.
We
Yeah.
engaged in a space race. We developed a nuclear weapon because of that. Like we we had that policy, but we now have what's called a lottery drawing when it comes to getting visas in this country, which means everybody goes into a bucket and you're randomly drawn out, and that determines whether or not you get visa status in the United States. And it is asinine to think that we wouldn't evaluate what you contribute to our society. And I'm not saying there's not room for compassion and refugees and all of that. There's room for
Yeah.
that. I do
Yes.
that through my church, not through my government, right? That's
Yes.
where I play. But I get that there's room for that. But at some point, this misguided notion that it's good for us to just randomly select people to come into this country rather than giving a neuroscientist from Ethiopia an expedited path, or a
Yes. Yes.
who's lived here and we've spent thousands of dollars educating them in our public school system, right? Why wouldn't we start there? Why wouldn't they have preferential treatment toward a pathway to citizenship? Why would
Wow.
somebody we made that investment in? There's room for those conversations, but the problem is they're much more contentious, and they interfere with a very pragmatic idea, which is secure the border, secure it. I'm not saying shut the gates. Some other my colleagues will say shut the gates. There's probably a time to shut the gates. I will take plug in the holes. I'll take
Yes.
plug.
Yes. And why I ask again, I always tell people in my community, I know people of all nationalities and parents call me losing kids, family members. fentanyl is really harming, terrorizing communities, and literally killing people. So if you're struggling with addiction, you know someone, get help. Do all that we can. And I'm speaking with a senator that didn't grab a talking point online. He was there. He spoke with it. That's why I really wanted to hear your view, because you are what I call boots on the ground. And I remember I reached out and reached out to you when you were there. Like, is it really that bad? And people may look at it as a political talking point or left versus right. But until you have lost someone, and people and you've seen people ravaged and communities tore apart, you will understand that something has to be done. And I love what you said, Senator. Border immigration, two separate things. I believe we have merged them, and there still need to be a process, because if you could speak to this, people have came into this country and we don't know where from. Is that correct? Just from all over, millions.
Well, it was interesting. So I volunteered for Catholic Charities when I was down there, who was processing
Okay.
coming in, and only a portion of those individuals were what we would consider Latino, right? I mean, Central American countries, Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala. There were folks who had flown into Mexico who were people of means and wealth, from Africa, from Asia, from all parts of the world, because it's so much easier to fly into Mexico and legally, I'm not talking about illegally, but come through the gate at our border, they know this, than it is to try to fly into the United States.
Wow.
Because if you fly into the United States, you've got to overstay a visa, which is an illegal activity. They know that they can fly into Mexico, come legally and document across the border, and their status is a legal status. They're not citizens, but they're a legal status. But yeah, it's by no means an issue of just Central American residents. I mean, it's people from all over the world that are using the southern border to come in.
Good deal. Wow. Thank you for the information. Good deal. Now, for those that saying, I'm listening to Senator Lowe, I love his story. I love his views. I love his policies, Republican, conservative. From those on the other side say, I mean, I'm a Democrat, but I really like this guy. He's up, y'all. In 2 more years, you'll see the signs in the campaign. You can put him right back there, and to keep doing the work that he's doing. But they want to know, where does he stand on the Second Amendment? Where does
Yeah.
he stand on magazine capacity? Where are you on the Second Amendment, Senator Lowe?
Well, I have two stances on it, and they
Okay.
work together. There's a legal stance. I believe I'm considered what's called an originalist when it comes to constitutional interpretation.
Okay.
And though I am not an attorney, I am somewhat of a constitutional scholar. I have written on the Constitution. I teach the Federalist Papers,
Wow.
so I do spend a lot of time on this. My legal position is that the founders, our current legal document, the Constitution, which is our social agreement, it's our social contract, says that it's not to be infringed, right? So my legal position is that from a state government, we are very limited on what we can do in controlling ownership policy of people who are not of law-abiding citizens. Let's put it that way. If you're a law-abiding citizen, state government is very limited on what we can do to do things outside of what's defined in the Second Amendment. So that's my legal position. So let's look at my practical position, my social position on firearms.
All right.
Again, kind of like with the school choice debate, there's rational fear and there's irrational fear. The epidemic of school shootings that we see oftentimes get distilled down to access to firearms. Yet when we look at school shootings, access is not the variable that impacts them. In fact, when we look at shootings in general, murders, that's why you see conservatives all the time point to Chicago, where access is hampered, right? You have less access to firearms in Chicago and in Illinois, yet the propensity of firearm violence is still rather high. So that tells me I'm going to pull a lever to impact saving lives, which is what we really should be talking about, right? How do we save lives? If I'm going to pull a lever to help save lives, that's not the most efficient lever to pull to start, right?
Okay.
When we look at states with open carry laws, there is no public safety risk, although you hear people all the time talk about that there could be a public safety risk. And it takes a lot of humility for someone to say what I'm about to say. Not everything that is reasonable, in other words, not everything that you can imagine could happen in your mind does happen. Just because you could see it, just because when I say to you, we're going to have open carry laws in the state of Tennessee, and you automatically think, wow, man, just anybody's going to have a gun and it's going to be the Wild West. Though you can see that, that doesn't mean it happens. And so when we look at states that do have open carry laws, no increased public safety risk.
Wow.
So people who aren't comfortable with firearms don't carry them. People who tend to carry firearms in public, for the vast most part, I'm talking in the 90th, top percentiles, are responsible, law-abiding citizens. They follow the law. They're not there to be a risk to someone. They're there to respond and to, if anything, increase safety for community.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Whether you think you're safe with them, but that's what happens. Very, very few people operate outside of that. And government doesn't have to create a law to create that behavior in humanity. It still exists, right? We see it from state to state. So when we talk about the Second Amendment, I think you have to look at it both from what you're legally capable of doing, but what would be a good thing when it comes to saving lives and those kind of things. We know that we talk about some hot button issues. In Tennessee, we talked about red flag laws, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about those.
Yeah, red flag law. So the notion of red flag law is there are crazy people out there, and that the red flag law allows society to police and keep crazy people from getting firearms. And what I'll tell you is red flag laws in mass are more often not used that way. They're used as weaponization in other conflicts. They're used to infringe upon the legal rights that law-abiding citizens often have, right?
Yep.
For the most part, people that we think of as crazy who might perpetrate harm, the best way to help those individuals not access things that could kill people is to provide them the mental health care that they're not currently getting, right? So we have to get back to the root of what really takes people's lives, and that's people engaging in violent homicidal behaviors.
Good.
Right?
Wow. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But we have to get to that, because what we know is if they don't have a gun, they'll go to other means, and those other means may not be nearly as efficient as firearms, but there's still means there, right? And so what I say is, if we want to save lives and we want to stop homicidal behavior, we have to get to the core of why people are homicidal. Many of us want to focus in that arena. As far as the gun control debate, it is currently getting in the way of having those conversations. So my problem with the gun control debate isn't that I don't enjoy discussing the merits and effectiveness of gun policy. It's that you won't allow us to have the mental health debate because of it. You're like, well, we want to start here first, and we're not going to talk about anything until we do this.
Yeah, that's great take. I want to slow that down in here. Where there's less access, where there's the most restriction, the most gun laws, if you will, is higher homicide rates, higher gun crime. The places where you say there's open carry and people say, well, it's just a wild, wild west. The data is saying something else, correct? The data is proving.
What I'm saying is it's not a variable that seems to matter.
Yeah.
That we don't improve public safety by decreasing access to responsible law-abiding people. And I've said this on the campaign. I don't believe passing laws on law-abiding people stop law-breaking people. I know we recycle that a lot of times.
No,
people who don't respect the law aren't going to respect new laws.
It's true. It's so true. And people, the gun hole loopholes and buying them and those background checks. And when I hear those, I'm like, no, anywhere you buy a legal firearm, and you correct me, there's a process. You sign, there's a background check. You do sign. I think people are not in favor of universal background checks, i.e. a registration of their firearms, which then can be confiscated and infringe on their rights in the Second Amendment. You're a constitutionalist. You don't need me telling you that. But
well, it's irrational fear, right? Like,
yes.
So a lot of what we see with the language we use around firearms is for the purpose of breeding an irrational fear. So let's take the phrase assault rifle. That phrase was created by an anti-gun think tank in the 80s for the sole purpose of confusing. Now, who's the author of confusion, Pastor?
Come on,
God,
somebody.
God is the author of confusion.
God is not the author of confusion, so we know that is the enemy.
That's right. So the purpose of that term was created to confuse the American public to think that domestic rifles that appeared military-esque were in fact military weapons, and they're not. They're functionally very, very different. And so we say automatic rifles. Well, you can buy an automatic rifle in the United States. I got news for you. You want me to really scare people? You can own a tank in the United States. But you know what you have to do? You have to get a tax stamp. And that costs you a couple of $100. And it requires the FBI to do a background check on you. If you want a suppressor, or what we often call a silencer on your firearm, the FBI does a background check on you. So you'll see politicians all the time. Our president of the United States has done it, where he has described a weapon that did not exist in that context for the sole purpose of the public. The people who have access to the weapons that the American public think are out on the streets causing all these crimes, those people have passed FBI background checks. And you want me to tell you how many automatic rifles have been used in mass violence in the past 30 years?
Please tell us. Come on. Wow.
0.
Wow.
Those people, the FBI's cleared them, right? The FBI's cleared them. Let me tell you another little story. This is a Tennessee story. So we had this conversation in 2006. Tennessee passed a bill which was effectively labeled guns in bars. It really was a guns in Red Lobster restaurant bill, right? It was the idea that when I'm carrying a firearm concealed or legally, that I don't have to leave that in my car, which is very dangerous to force someone to leave.
Very, very dangerous.
And I can still go eat in Applebee's because it serves alcohol as long as I'm not drinking. Okay. As long as I'm not drinking, I'm abiding by the law, I can have my firearm. The left said, well, if we do that, it's going to be shootouts. All these drunk people are going to start shooting each other. It has been almost 20 years since Tennessee adopted that policy. And you know how many reported instances of a permitted carrier shooting someone in a bar drunk and all that? You know how many of those we've had?
No, tell us.
0.
Wow.
For those home, we see some commonality here. Irrational fear. Just because you could reason it to happen doesn't mean it does.
Wow. That's super good, man. Listen, viewers, you just got a tutorial history lesson, a breakdown on the Second Amendment. So now I think you guys believe and know and heard what Senator Lowe and his stance on the Second Amendment. Like he said, you can go get it. The FBI is going to pull up, want to talk to you. And for those that have those things and been checked by the FBI, 0. Those that said we're going to have shootouts in bars, 0. Love what he said. Where there's less access, there's more crime. Man, gun crime. Let me be clear. And so
often think about the things that look like those things cosmetically, right? So semi-automatic AR-15s, right? Yeah. Or AK-47. Yeah. They're semi-automatic, which makes them functionally the same as any other semi-automatic gun.
Yep.
So here's the irony. If we're talking about, again, I'm going to pull a lever to save lives, which is my ultimate goal. I want to save lives. I'm not even looking at any rifles because most lives taken illegally through homicide occur, like 70+%, 78 or something. It fluctuates year to year.
Yep.
Handguns.
Yep.
It's handguns. So We can be scared. We can buy into the fear mongering, the confusion that was laid out by all the political mind hackers to scare the American public into certain policies. You can feed into that fear all you want. But what I'm here to tell you is the people who choose to perpetrate violence with firearms, number one, they use handguns. They use them predominantly in settings where they don't anticipate retaliatory fire, i.e. gun-free
Free
zones.
zones. Oh, come on, gun-free zones. Hey, and you know this, Senator. 1990 brought into law in 91. The now president created. Joe Biden had a hand in the gun-free zone. So that is. Go ahead. And now the data shows 90% of those mass shootings take place in gun-free zones. So again, I say this tongue in cheek. Thanks, Joe.
Well, and this is why when we had a tragic shooting in Tennessee 2 years ago, why the legislature immediately moved on the most aggressive school safety bill in the nation's history. It wasn't just fortification, but we funded making sure that there were armed school resource officers in every school in the state, that they had access to that money funding wasn't an obstacle to having those present. Because here's the reality in the school shooting setting, which is what eats up most of the oxygen in the room, right? However rare it may be. This is what I need parents and families to know. Statistically, school shootings, though very tragic, are very, very rare. Very, very rare. And so we have to take them for what they are, which is a rare occurrence. But when they do occur, the carnage happens in like the first 2 minutes. You cannot respond from outside the school in the period of time. You have to have assets in the building. So when we talk about SROs being in our schools, when we talk about qualified arming teachers, no one's handing every teacher a gun, right? Tennessee just passed a bill that said if you are willing to go through the equivalent training of a sheriff's deputy through post, and the school agrees to it and the sheriff agrees to it, you can be part of the active shooter plan. We have schools that have former law enforcement working as teachers in the schools. It's asinine to think that those people would not be assets to safety of our kids in an active shooter situation because of that 2-minute window, right? You have 2 minutes. So you have assets in the building, and those assets, they've got to be armed.
They have to. When they say when seconds counts, cops are minutes away. Sometimes you gotta be your own first responder, and that makes sense. I love what you said again about arming teachers. You're saying they're not just coming in with a backpack full of guns, passing them out. You get a gun, you get a gun, you get a gun. It's qualified, go through the steps. Everyone won't have one, but you're saying having boots on the ground, teachers, if you will, that no one's aware, that's been trained, that are qualified to protect life. Heaven forbid someone comes into a school trying to take life.
Yeah, no one's passing out guns to teachers when they get their teacher license. You need to think of it this way. These are law enforcement trained personnel who happen to teach.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. And I know a good friend that a few of them that are like that law enforcement within the teaching within the law enforcement that are trained. I like that people give your comments. I know we some are agreeing, some are probably throwing digital fruit at you right now, Senator Lowe. Hey,
I signed up for it. Again, we talk about these things. And it's fair to disagree, and this is what I'll say to anybody. It's fair to disagree, but disagree on substance, not fear. Don't let fear control you. I teach my kids a very fundamental thing in my house, right? Fear is reserved for the Lord, right? What fear is reserved for. If you buy into irrational fear, it is a dishonor to God, right? And we do that as people of faith. We teach that. But I want to encourage you. You can disagree about the gun debate and do all those things. Just make sure if it's something you're afraid of, that there's a legitimate there's a legitimate threat there when you analyze it. Don't buy into the irrational stuff.
Wow.
It doesn't help the discussion, right? It doesn't help when it comes time to actually, again, find the levers, pass things that actually save lives. Putting SROs in schools, save lives, because we know that 2-minute window matters, right? Let me tell you, the biggest thing that you can do to stop irresponsible, homicidal, or mentally unstable people from committing crimes is recognize when they're in your family and your bubble, right? When you recognize and take care of your family. You know, back in the day, we used to take care of our drunk uncle. He's still our drunk uncle, right?
Come on, Senator.
Ability to pull the drunk uncle back, right?
Yeah.
We need you to do that. So if you know somebody in your family that is fostering that resentment, that anxiety and stuff, please get a medical care. But I will say this, you will see from the legislature in the next year or so, this active discussion on what it means to intercept a growing class of students who are more anxious, depressed, and suicidal than ever before. The Surgeon General has reported that social media is the #1 contributor to that, and our teens are 3 times more depressed than they've ever been in history. Wow. And there's a great book I'm going to put you on. If you don't read my book, Naked True, go read a book by a guy named Jonathan Haidt. He wrote a great book called Coddling of the American Mind, but he's got a new book out now called The Anxious Generation. The Anxious. And it's about how our kids and their anxiety is fostering a lot of this homicidal, violent tendencies and suicidal nature that we're having to deal with. So we got to get to the root of it, right? We got to get to our kids. We got to get them and find them where they are, whether they're at a Boys and Girls Club, whether they're at a school system, regardless. And we got to get them the help they need. And it's going to take you looking in your family for those things.
That's so true. So good. Y'all heard that. I'm going to definitely pick up that book. Senator, you were at the Republican convention, right? You were a delegate. If y'all don't follow Senator Lowe, he was like, had a behind the scenes, giving updates. It was super entertaining. It was just looking fun. Could you elaborate? What was your experience? How was it? What was going on? The Republican nominee, 45th President Donald J. Trump picked JD Vance as VP. Were you surprised?
I was for JD. He's a young guy. He's only been in the Senate for 2 years. And of course, we can thank Barack Obama for breaking that mold.
Yeah.
Years as a senator, and he was president. So, things are different than they used to be. I'm still a little old school, and I like a little, not necessarily literal gray hair in your head, but I like to know that you've run some things. So I tend to look at governors. I thought we had a good slate of Republican governors that had been very responsible, had done well during COVID, which is, that's the big revealer, right? How did you behave during COVID? Were you right? Were you wrong? We're not having enough of those discussions, are we? We're not
at all.
About things we were told that weren't right and who told them to us.
We
give people a big pass on that stuff. And I'm going, when it comes to selecting the leader of the free world, I kind of want people who got it right under duress, So we had those. Glenn Youngkin was a good opportunity. Ron DeSantis. I mean, there's a lot of good opportunity, but he chose JD Vance for a very specific reason. He's a kind of a populist conservative from a Rust Belt state. And in a time where the last 3 years under the Biden administration, those people have seen their quality of life diminish, right? Inflation is a tax on everybody. Inflation is everybody. And if you're at the lowest income, if you're working class or low income, it hits you harder. And so JD Vance is from that background. He wrote his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. You can read that, see the video. I think the movie's on Netflix. Tells you his backstory, but they obviously selected him because he can talk about those things.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's.
What do you say to the people that doesn't have a forgiving spirit, don't believe people can evolve? They say he was a never Trumper. Trump was an idiot. Trump is a threat. Trump is this is stuff Snapchat JD. So if you see this is not Quantel. You equated him to Hitler. What'd you say, Senator?
Yeah, you said it.
You said I said it. They I said it. What do you like now? He's had a change of heart. What do you say about their opponents saying you can't trust these guys? He said this, and then they're buddy. Like, do you believe people can have one view next year and thought this way 10 years ago and say, hey, I saw the light?
Yeah, well, I don't know that. I don't know that JD Vance has convinced me he's seen the light.
Okay.
That
Okay.
he's Trump light. I think he's done what many people in politics must do, which is calculate your options.
Mm.
And you choose. Not everything's so black and white and clean as we want it to be. We've talked a lot about those things on this program today. We talked about gun control. We talked about abortion. None of those things are fuzzy and clean. There's no true clarity. There are consequences to life, right? My mother, when she chose to keep me, there was a consequence to her respecting my existence, right? We can't pretend there aren't consequences to that. We calculate and make decisions on the information we have to best move forward. JD Vance is clearly calculated for him to do the most good in his career and for the American people. To help and join with President Trump is the way to do that. Will there be consequences to that? Are there going to be policies he doesn't like? Are there going to be some things that aren't effective? Are there going to be some things that upset him? Well, if history's any indicator, the answer is yes. I don't think Trump's ever been completely in cohesion with any other person on the planet, right? Like if there's one thing for certain is he's his own thing. Like there's not many people like him. I think that's what JD Vance has done. I don't know that he's had some big revelation that he's come to the light. I think he's looked and said the options before me are this. The best individual to gain the White House back is the guy who in his 4 years, people felt like their families were prosperous.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's why they selected him as the nominee. That's why they tolerate all the tweets and all the other crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Aside from all of that stuff that's maybe annoying to some, this guy was pretty productive as president. And I felt it in my purse and I felt it in my family. And I want that back because I miss it. That's what he's tapping into.
Good deal. Good deal. And you, they actually asked for you, the Trump administration, right? You're a big deal, Senator. You were
an alternative delegate. And so the campaign reached out and asked if I'd be willing to go to the convention. Not that I was anything productive up there, but when you talk about a campaign, the campaign is thousands of people, right? So Donald Trump's at the top of that ticket. You have relationships with people at the state and local level who are working with and for the campaign. They might be donors, they might be political operatives, they might be, colleagues in some fashion. And so it often comes back to personal relationship. I did endorse Ron DeSantis in the primary. Okay. Again, I went back to who got it most right during COVID.
Yeah. Wow.
Got a lot right during COVID, both with policy and how he navigated things in Florida. And so I liked that governorship piece. Trump won the nomination and I shifted the endorsement. Again, you evaluate the choices before you, right? Yeah. You think that Donald Trump is best suited to economically restore what a lot of families need right now.
Good deal. Two more questions. I'm gonna let you go, Senator. And you being super gracious with with your time, man. This has been a fun, intriguing, enlightened conversation. What do you say to people that say I'm voting third party? Are you one of those that's a wasted vote? Are you one of those people say I'm going libertarian, I'm going green, I'm going independent, I'm going Constitution? Yeah. Like, what about people that vote third party?
I don't think any vote's wasted. The process of engaging in politics and the electoral process is worth doing, however you choose to do it, right? Okay. Like, even if it's just rehearsal for when you actually vote and your vote matters. So, in that space. So I think it's worth doing, whether or not your vote is productive to what you want. I encourage people to evaluate that, right? Like, if the purpose of your vote is to object to the two-party system, then by all means, a third-party vote's the most appropriate vote. If that's the thing that you're most concerned about, if that's the thing that you really want to take a stand against, have at it, right? But if your goal is to improve your economic condition, you might want to have a say in the people that are likely to win the office, right? So everybody different system of values that they bring to the ballot box. So I don't particularly judge that. I'll just encourage people to participate in voting. And, in Tennessee, we're number one for election integrity in Tennessee. Let's not ignore the fact that election confidence is a problem right now.
Come on.
With real or not, right? These are back to the irrational fear. There are a lot of people who have an irrational fear around elections. It's our job oftentimes to try to boost confidence in those people. and we've tried to pass policies to boost confidence. Some people take those policies very personal. Like some people don't like the fact you got to show an ID to vote, but that's all just to boost confidence in voting, right? And so we need you to take your ID to the ballot box, go vote, take your ID, and
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak for myself. People that look like me, people from my nationality and culture. We're not a monolith, so I don't speak for all African American people or Black people or whatever you identify as when it comes to pigmentation and melon count. But I have an ID. I have a few of them. I never had trouble getting ID. I kind of take that as like a insult when they say, well, this is marginalizing and holding some people back. Listen, my cousins, my friends, my uncles, we all have a driver's license, an ID, and I've been quote unquote Black for a very long time, Senator.
As long
Um,
as you,
yeah, as long as you've known me, I've never had trouble having a getting identification. So the backhanded let us help them and you're holding these people back. I'm speaking for me and those that I know personally. Like we don't struggle to get an ID and go to the DMV and have driver's license. So the notion that having ID, again, I'm speaking for me, that making me show my identification when I go vote is somehow racist or requiring that is racist because Quantel just can't seem to figure out how to go get a picture ID it's a little insulting, if I to say the least. So
it's that is definitely something that I'm glad to hear you say. It's something I think, but I don't necessarily get to say because
yeah,
I'm Black, you know. But I would find it very offensive, you
well,
know, if
I mean,
I would be like, do you not think? I mean, it's free, so there's not an economic barrier. You got to take a little time to get an ID, but the premise is pretty simple. I mean, just prove it's your vote to make. Right? Like so often, I mean, you go to cash a check, they're gonna make you prove it's your check to cash. I mean, there's a lot of you're gonna pick your kid up from school. You got to prove it's your kid to pick up, right? Like, I mean,
yes, yes.
we're just there because people want to make sure, for the purpose of the integrity of whatever system you're engaging in, for other people to have confidence in that system, they have to some degree police and make sure that people aren't trying to abuse the system. So, yeah, I think it's a reasonable thing.
Yeah, I use ID to board a flight. I use ID to check out my children. And get this, I go and get my kids all year round. They've been at the same school. They ID me every time.
Call you
Like,
by name. Hey, good to see you, Quantel. Let me see your
let,
right.
well, you must be in there with me. And I'm like, you just said my name. So again, I would advise a political party or the others or anyone leave that one. Don't pull that trick out. That's a bad play to run because I just feel like I have multiple identifications. I mean, from passports to ID. That's a bad one. It's offensive. I'm speaking for me, and I know I'm speaking for a lot of others. But yeah, that's a bad. It's offensive that I can't get up and go get an ID.
The operative phrase is voter suppression. That's the people thing, the thing that's sold that you should fear, that your vote's being oppressed and being suppressed, right? So here's what I will tell you. Again, God's not the author of confusion. People are
Come on.
trying to confuse you by trying to tell you that it is difficult to vote, and it is not difficult to vote. It is not. You register to vote. If you've moved to an area, if you've never quite registered, if you turn 18, go ahead. You go to the local election office and you say, I would like to register. They give you a 1-page form typically. You fill it out, you register to vote. In Tennessee, you don't even have to declare a party. We don't do party registration, right? You can vote in either primary. So you fill that out. You're now registered to vote. They're going to ask you to sign that. And that's what they're going to compare your signature with later on to make sure nobody tries to steal your identity, right? Remember, they're protecting your identity too if you're a responsible voter. And then when it comes time to vote, vote. We've created early voting to where you can vote early.
Yes,
On
yes,
election day, if you love the hoopla of that, you can
yeah.
get an absentee ballot. If you feel like you can't vote early or on election day, I mean, it is not difficult to vote. That is an irrational fear that's sold to you to confuse you, to make you think that people hate you, whoever you are, so bad that they want to suppress your vote. That is not the case, right?
Yeah.
That's not how the election system. Now, the parties, the political candidates may not want you to vote, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
vote your people not to vote, and they
Yeah.
do things to try to make you think that you shouldn't go vote. That happens, but as far as the actual governmental system of elections, no, it doesn't work.
Listen, early voting is still taking place in our community. Go do it. I do both. Sometimes I like the hoopla. I like to go in. Sometimes you go stand out there and see the politician getting that last campaign in, and he can't stand behind this sign. He has to stay out here. So it's sometimes I'll go just because it's fun. But no, I have no issue with voting, and probably because I live in the greatest state. I mean, maybe you guys want to come here, get some Tennessee in your life. Maybe.
We're kind of full at the moment. We don't have a place for you to live
Right now, yeah, they're
we
still building.
want to come here, but you might need to wait till home values. We get some more houses built. In the meantime,
Listen,
come hang out with us.
what's the saying is, don't leave that place and come here and vote the same. Don't leave that.
Some of that, like if you we have a lot of political refugees in the state coming from California, New York, whatever the case, because Tennessee is a conservative state, and whether you're conservative or not, that's the reality. Conservatives are moving here because of how we're doing things, because of the prosperity we see under conservative management at the governmental level. I have to remind those folks all the time, you came for a reason. Don't screw that up, right? Like we've done some things right, but a lot of time they bring their fears that were from the things they did see happen in the other states that don't happen here in Tennessee. And what I'll say is Tennesseans are very neighborly, even when you're disagreeable. And if you are agreeable, just remember that when you came here, we did some things right to draw you here.
Wow, that is so true, guys. Play that back and listen to this in again. Last one. Your favorite politician is not seeking re-election. He said he's going to bow. He said Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, let me be respectful, said he is not seeking re-election. He's going to finish out his term, and he endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. I cannot let you go without getting your thoughts on Joe Biden as a president these past 3.5 years, Kamala as a vice, him dropping out, people saying they didn't give the Democrats voters in the party a voice. They kind of with a little monarch on them. So I can't let you go without asking you that, and we'll get out of here.
It's an interesting moment in history. We can argue over whether Joe Biden has suffered from dementia, but what is clear is his health has declined, and we have not had optimal Joe Biden in his presidency. Right? No one would say that the last 4 years of what Joe Biden has been in the entirety of his political career were his best 4 years. Nobody would say that. And
fair. True.
So I think it's the right decision by him. Again, back to confidence, right? There's not a lot of confidence this guy gets any better for another 4 years, right? So it was a smart decision by him. I do think it creates some political problems for Donald Trump and his team on the right because they lose that argument, The selection of the VP, though, it's not surprising because that's kind of assumed anyway. Like that's the pattern. Joe Biden's actually the one that broke that cycle when he chose not to run after the end of Obama's term.
Oh, wow.
Way for Hillary Clinton. Now, we all know that he really didn't clear the way for her. She kind of cleared him out of the way for her. But, and so he kind of came back around on the back end. He would have liked to have run then. So the assumption is it goes to the VP. But if you're the party who has, in the halls of Nashville, for the past 2 years, yelled in my face, this is not what democracy looks like. And you're supporting this move, I'm going to call you a hypocrite. Like like this is the most undemocratic thing. Like we're a republic nationally, but our democracy exists within our states and exists within how we select our candidates. It's where democracy actually does exist. And the place it does exist, and your party effectively removed it. All of the delegates that pledged to her as individuals, not as representatives of the people who went to the ballot box. So the public has been cut out of the nomination decision. Clearly, nomination decision. The question will be, will the voters on the left, will the Democratic voters of the Democratic Party, will they hold the party accountable? Will they protest vote in November or not show up to the ballot box, right? And that goes back, you asked me about the third party vote. This is another one of those. Do you feel democracy is so important to protect that you would risk a Trump presidency and not show up to the ballot box to communicate to your party, don't ever do this again?
Wow.
I know some that will. I know some that are like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not risking Trump presidency on it. So, it's an interesting moment in history. I'm always a student of the setting I'm in. Like, I'm a student in Nashville first when I get up there. I love watching all that moves around. Earlier, you mentioned theatrics. There's plenty of theatrics, right? Yeah. I love analyzing and watching all that. I love this moment in history, even though I have very clear opinions what I want to happen or should happen. But it is a historical moment.
That's amazing. And if you correct me if I'm wrong, I love what you said. We're a national republic, but we function as a democracy, because if my memory serves me correctly, the word democracy is not in our Constitution nor the Declaration of Independence. So where do we get this democracy? We say that a lot more than we say a republic.
Well, the supporting writings, right? So I told you I teach the Federalist Papers. We see this notion discussed pretty heavily by both James Madison and Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers. And it's around the notion of fitness. What constitutes fitness? And it's not just the fitness to vote, but the fitness to serve. Like, they really looked at both of those things.
Okay.
Who they right to vote. And of course, in their context in time, it would have been white males, right?
Yeah.
You go to Europe, though, and it would have been landowners, lords. Like, do you have a vested interest in the game? And over time, what we've done is we've not changed the notion of fitness and its importance, which is why we have a republic, is to assure fitness of candidacy. But we have decided who's capable of deciding fitness, who's capable of being fit. We've changed that. So we haven't changed the process definition, but we have changed kind of the participant definition, which is great. 19th Amendment, women get the right to vote, the abolition of slavery, reintroduction of rights there, getting rid of the 3/5 clause of the Constitution. All of that isn't changing democracy, but it is changing the participant definition of democracy, which has been great.
Good deal. Hey, listen, in the halls of Nashville, you have some explaining to do. If you've been yelling at the Senator Lowe, hey, look, come on the Quantel Lindsey show and tell me about it. Hey, listen, Senator, when you're not studying history, when you're not bringing bills, when you're not cutting people up verbally in your comment section, what do you do for fun? How do you just relax when you're not pushing Tennessee forward? What does Joshua Adam, not Dr. Lowe, what does the husband, the father, what does the man do to relax?
Listen, every waking moment with your kids, your family, I can't say that enough. Every waking moment. And when you're like me and you're as busy as I am and pulled away as often as I am, all of those moments become more and more precious. But as far as activities, I hunt and fish. I love being in the water. But here's the thing, man. I am a foodie.
Come on.
I cook. Yeah. I eat. Pull the smokers out. I mean, I do all those things. I like to travel and eat new stuff. I love American fusion and ethnic cuisines. I love it all, man. So you ask me what I want to do tomorrow, somewhere in there is going to be eat.
Somewhere eating, and that's true. If you follow his brother on social, him and his family, when they get a chance, they're gonna pull out somewhere local, support somewhere local. Senator, I'm so sorry I said it was the last question. What do you represent? For those that don't know, what sections, Bradley County, who do you represent? Where is that for those that want to vote for you and say, well, does he represent my county? Who all make up those 210,000? I heard you correct.
That's right. So Southeast Tennessee, if you're in Bradley County, McMinn County, Meigs County, and Ray County.
Okay. Now,
centers are Dayton, Decatur, Athens, and Cleveland. And there's other cities in there, but those are the city centers of those counties.
Okay.
If you're in those areas, I am your senator, and I'm privileged to serve you.
Good deal. Y'all heard it here. Y'all, we talked about everything. This was amazing conversation. Great answers. Senator Lowe, last one. Who are you endorsing for president of the United States 2024?
Well, I'm on the Trump train. Again, I think we saw a prosperous 4 years with Donald Trump the first go around, and it's that important. Like, we have to get a wrangle on inflation. We've got to have strong position in national politics and conflicts. Strength internationally is part of what we sell. We got to remind people what our position in the world is a position of strength. It opens up trade for us. It opens up a lot of things for us that we depend on in American society. And I think we need that right now. I anticipate and hope, I pray for our leaders. The Bible says that they're appointed by God, so pray for them. I pray we see the best Trump years. If we get another 4 Trump years, and we avoid some pandemics, that would be nice. But yeah, let's do that. In no particular offense to Kamala Harris, she has not proven to me to be to listen to policies that matter to the American family. She listens to policies that maybe matter to the culture war propagators. She listens to policies that maybe matter to the politicos, and even to the policies that may matter to my fellow academics in academia. But when it comes to families, your mom, your wife, your children, those kind of things, I think there's a lot of neglect in that policy platform. So if you are on the left, if you are a Democrat, please fix that. Please fix it.
Wow. Carol Beck said, interesting. Thanks for sharing. Be careful. They are appointed by man, not God. I'll go through those comments later. And if you, Adam Lowe, man, thank you. Listen, if you're on YouTube, comment, like, subscribe to the Quantel Lindsey podcast. Senator, thank you so much for being gracious with your time, for not shying away from any question. You're a different type of politician.
Some would argue not a very good politician.
You go head first. You go head first. I thank you, brother. Listen, I pray for your family. Pray Godspeed. Continue doing what you're doing. Thank you, Senator. Have a good one. This is the Quantel Lindsey podcast. This episode was brought to you by Blueprint for Life. There is no blueprint for life, but together we can create one. Peace.
Have a good one.